Welcome to Life Stories, where we bring you heartwarming tales filled with love, resilience, and life's most profound lessons. In today's story, we follow Michael, a wealthy man lost in a world of luxury and loneliness. As an unexpected invitation to a humble Christmas celebration transforms his life forever. From the glitz of a mansion to the warmth of a small family home. This is a journey of self-discovery, love, and the true meaning of happiness. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories to begin this touching tale and stay tuned for more stories that will inspire your soul. In the heart of Manhattan, in a luxurious penthouse overlooking Central Park, lived Michael Whitman, a man whose life seemed plucked from a modern fairy tale. At 38, Michael was the kind of person others envied and secretly wished to be. Handsome, charismatic, and effortlessly wealthy. He had inherited a vast fortune from his English-American family and expanded it into a thriving business empire. Yet, despite his immense success, Michael was known not for his work but for his lifestyle, one that shimmered with extravagance and endless indulgence. Michael's days were filled with the kind of pleasures that most could only dream of: dinners in Michelin-starred restaurants, private jet getaways to exotic locations, and glittering parties in the company of the rich and famous. He laughed loudly and often, relishing the sound of champagne glasses clinking and the hum of luxury that defined his world. He didn't need anyone to be happy, or so he told himself. On the surface, Michael was the epitome of a man living life to the fullest. But beneath the polished veneer of his existence was a void he refused to acknowledge. His laughter, as hearty as it sounded, often rang hollow when the music faded and the crowds dispersed. His solitude was a truth he had long mastered hiding, even from himself. It was a bright December morning when the story truly began to unfold. The Manhattan skyline glittered in the winter sun as Michael lounged on his sprawling balcony, flipping idly through a travel magazine. His assistant, Emily, approached him with her usual efficiency, placing a tray of breakfast on the table beside him. "Mr. Whitman, your itinerary for Aspen is confirmed. Departure is set for Christmas Eve. As usual. Shall I review the details with you?" she asked, her tone polite and professional. Michael nodded absent-mindedly, adjusting his designer sunglasses. Aspen had been his Christmas tradition for over a decade. Nestled in snow-covered luxury, it was a haven where he and his best friend Daniel escaped the sentimental chaos of the holiday season. For Michael, Christmas was a spectacle of forced cheer and shallow generosity, an event he had always found distasteful. "Emily, make sure the penthouse in Aspen is ready," he replied, his voice as casual as the flick of the magazine pages. "You know the drill, everything top-notch." Later that evening, as Michael sipped his favorite vintage wine in his penthouse's opulent living room, his phone rang. It was Daniel. They had spoken just days earlier to finalize their Christmas plans, so Michael was surprised by the call. "Daniel, what's up?" Michael greeted, leaning back into the plush couch. Daniel's voice held an uncharacteristic hesitation. "Michael, we need to talk about Aspen." Michael frowned. "Talk about what? Don't tell me you're canceling. It's our tradition." There was a long pause on the other end before Daniel finally spoke. "I've met someone, Michael. Her name's Rachel. I think I'm going to spend Christmas with her." For a moment, Michael didn't respond. The words landed like an unwelcome guest. "Someone," he repeated, incredulous. "Daniel, you're joking, right? It's Christmas. It's Aspen. It's our thing." "I know," Daniel said, his tone apologetic but firm. "But this is different. I'm in love, Michael." The word felt foreign and absurd to Michael. "Love." He let out a bitter laugh. "Love, Daniel. Come on. That's for naive dreamers. Not us. You know that better than anyone." Daniel's voice took on a rare seriousness. "Maybe it is. But for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." When the call ended, Michael sat in silence, staring at the sleek skyline visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. For the first time in years, he felt unsettled. How could Daniel, his closest companion in a life of unbridled freedom, choose something as transient as love over their cherished tradition? The idea grated at him, stirring a restlessness he couldn't quite name. Over the following days, Michael attempted to salvage his plans, reaching out to other friends to join him in Aspen. But one by one, they declined, their own holiday commitments taking precedence. The rejection chipped away at his usual confidence. And for the first time, Michael felt the weight of solitude pressing against the edges of his carefully curated life. On Christmas Eve, the penthouse was eerily quiet. Michael had dismissed most of his staff for the holidays, save for Rosa, his housekeeper. Rosa was a woman of quiet strength, having worked for Michael for over a decade. Her demeanor was warm but reserved, a sharp contrast to the high-energy world Michael inhabited. She moved about the expansive apartment with practiced efficiency, ensuring everything was in its place. The dinner Michael had ordered from an exclusive restaurant sat untouched on the table. He wandered through the halls, pausing in front of the grand Christmas tree adorned with glittering ornaments. To him, it was nothing more than decoration, a symbol of a season he neither understood nor cared for. Rosa appeared in the doorway, holding her coat and handbag. "Mr. Whitman, I'll be heading home now. My family is waiting for me." Michael nodded absently. "Of course, Rosa. Enjoy." She hesitated, her gaze softening as she studied him. "Are you spending Christmas alone, Mr. Whitman?" "By choice," he replied, attempting to sound nonchalant. "I prefer it that way." Rosa frowned, her eyes betraying a quiet concern. "No one prefers to be alone. Not on Christmas." Michael looked away, unsure of how to respond. Rosa's words carried a weight that unsettled him. She lingered a moment longer before speaking again. "Why don't you spend Christmas with us, Mr. Whitman? It's nothing fancy, but it's heartfelt." Michael laughed nervously, ready to dismiss the offer. But there was something in Rosa's expression, an unspoken understanding, that made him pause. She wasn't just his housekeeper in that moment, she was a woman who had seen the truth of his loneliness, even when he refused to see it himself. "Think about it," Rosa said, her voice gentle. "It's not good for anyone to be alone tonight." As she left, Michael stood in the vast, silent apartment, her words echoing in his mind. Alone. That's exactly how he felt. But did it have to be that way? He glanced at the untouched dinner, the gleaming tree, the empty expanse of his home. For the first time in years, he felt a pang of something unfamiliar, a longing for connection. The clock ticked toward midnight, the weight of the night pressing in around him. Rosa's invitation hung in the air, an open door to a world he had long avoided. And in the stillness of that moment, Michael began to wonder if perhaps she was right. Perhaps, just this once, it was time to step beyond the gilded walls of his solitude and see what lay on the other side. The cold December air nipped at Michael Whitman's face as he stepped outside his penthouse. For a man who rarely left the comfort of his luxury vehicles or private jets, walking to his car under the Manhattan sky was a rare event. The city lights twinkled around him, but the usual hum of excitement he felt from the bustling streets was absent. Tonight, everything felt different. The drive to Rosa's neighborhood was uneventful, but Michael couldn't shake the strange mixture of unease and curiosity stirring within him. It wasn't like him to act on impulse. And yet, here he was, heading to a modest part of the Bronx to spend Christmas Eve with his housekeeper and her family. As the car pulled into a quiet street lined with simple homes strung with colorful Christmas lights, Michael sat for a moment, questioning whether he should just turn around and head back to his penthouse. But then he saw Rosa standing by the door of a small, warmly lit house, her coat drawn tight around her. She spotted his car and waved, her smile so genuine it disarmed him. He stepped out, clutching the bags of food and gifts he had hastily packed before leaving. "Mr. Whitman, I wasn't sure you'd come," Rosa said, her voice a blend of surprise and gratitude. Michael shrugged, trying to mask his nervousness. "Neither was I." She led him inside, and Michael was immediately struck by the warmth of the home, not just the physical warmth but the atmosphere itself. The air smelled of freshly baked bread and spices, and the walls were adorned with family photos and handmade decorations. A small Christmas tree stood in the corner, its lights blinking erratically but charmingly. "Mom, who's this?" a young girl's voice called from the kitchen. "This is Mr. Whitman," Rosa said, her tone soft as she placed a hand on Michael's arm. "He's spending Christmas with us." A young woman emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. Her hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, and her face was flushed from the heat of the stove. Michael guessed this was Clara, Rosa's eldest daughter. She was beautiful, but not in the polished, artificial way he was used to seeing. Her beauty was natural, her presence unpretentious. "Welcome, Mr. Whitman," she said, offering him a warm smile. "We're glad you're here." Michael returned the smile awkwardly, feeling out of place. "Thank you. Please, call me Michael." As they moved into the living room, Michael noticed how the family had gathered around a small table laden with modest but lovingly prepared dishes. Rosa's two younger children, a boy and a girl, giggled as they played with paper crowns from Christmas crackers. Clara, ever the orchestrator, was busy ensuring everything was ready for their meal. Sit, Rosa urged, pulling out a chair for him at the table. "You're our guest." Michael obeyed, feeling an unfamiliar sense of humility. He watched as Rosa and Clara moved with ease, their laughter and banter filling the room with a warmth he hadn't realized he missed. The younger children soon warmed to him, peppering him with questions about his car, his penthouse, and the kinds of adventures he'd had. "Do you have a family, Mr. Michael?" the boy asked innocently. Michael paused, the question catching him off guard. He glanced at Clara, who had momentarily stopped what she was doing, her expression curious but not probing. "Not really," Michael admitted after a moment. "I grew up with my parents, but they were busy people." Clara's gaze softened, but she didn't push further. Instead, she changed the subject, asking him about his favorite places to travel. As the evening unfolded, Michael found himself relaxing, drawn into the family's simple but heartfelt celebration. After dinner, Clara brought out a deck of cards and proposed a game. "It's tradition," she explained. "Each person answers a question about themselves. No lies allowed." Michael laughed, feeling a mixture of amusement and trepidation. He wasn't used to sharing personal details, especially not in such an intimate setting. But as the game went on, he found himself enjoying the honesty and vulnerability it encouraged. When it was his turn, Clara asked, "What's your happiest memory, Michael?" The room fell silent, all eyes on him. Michael hesitated, searching for an answer. His life was filled with extravagant experiences, but none of them felt truly happy. Finally, he said, "I think it might be tonight. This is different for me." "In a good way." Clara smiled, her eyes meeting his. "Different can be good." As the night wore on, Michael began to feel a connection to these people he had barely known. Clara's kindness and quiet strength intrigued him, and Rosa's unwavering care reminded him of the mother he had always wished for. For the first time in years, Michael felt something he couldn't quite name, a sense of belonging. By the time he returned to his penthouse in the early hours of Christmas morning, Michael couldn't stop thinking about the evening. The laughter, the stories, the simplicity of it all. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced. He stood in his living room, staring at the lavish but soulless Christmas tree. The emptiness that usually filled his home felt more pronounced than ever. As he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, one thought kept circling his mind: How could something so simple feel so profound? For the first time, Michael felt the cracks in the life he had so carefully built. And he wasn't sure he could ignore them anymore. The morning light crept through the gaps in Michael's heavy curtains. But he remained motionless in bed. His mind replayed the warmth of the previous evening, the laughter of Rosa's children. The way Clara's eyes lit up when she spoke. The simple yet profound joy of being in their presence. It was a stark contrast to the cold emptiness of his penthouse. Michael rose reluctantly, pacing the floor with his morning coffee in hand. For years, his life had been a series of meticulously planned events, exclusive parties, luxury vacations, and business meetings that kept him on the move. But for the first time, those things felt hollow. The image of Clara's smile and the sincerity of Rosa's invitation lingered in his mind like a whisper, urging him to seek something more. By midday, Michael found himself calling Rosa. She answered with her usual warmth, though she sounded surprised. "Mr. Michael, is everything all right?" she asked. "Yes, Rosa," he replied, hesitating. "I just wanted to thank you again for last night. It was different. Good different." Rosa chuckled softly. "We were happy to have you. You're welcome anytime, Mr. Michael." He ended the call feeling a strange mix of relief and anticipation. Michael knew he couldn't ignore the pull he felt toward Rosa's family, and especially toward Clara. There was something grounding about their world, a world so far removed from his own. That evening, Michael decided to visit Rosa's house again. This time, he brought thoughtful gifts, a box of toys for the children, a bouquet of fresh flowers for Rosa, and a book for Clara. It wasn't extravagant, just a collection of small tokens he thought they might appreciate. When he arrived, the children greeted him with excited cheers. Rosa's eyes widened in surprise, though her smile showed her gratitude. "You didn't have to do this, Mr. Michael," Rosa said, gesturing to the gifts. "I wanted to," he replied simply. Clara appeared from the kitchen, her hands dusted with flour. She raised an eyebrow at him but smiled nonetheless. "Back so soon? You must really like Mom's cooking." Michael chuckled, feeling an unfamiliar ease in her presence. "I guess you could say I've developed a taste for something new." Over the next few hours, Michael helped Rosa in the kitchen, played games with the children, and even sat on the floor with them to assemble one of the new toys. It was a sight no one who knew him would have believed. The infamous Michael Whitman, the unattainable bachelor, kneeling on the floor of a modest Bronx home with a child's laughter echoing around him. As the evening settled, Michael found himself alone with Clara in the living room. She had brought out a small acoustic guitar and began strumming softly, filling the room with a melody that seemed to match the warmth of the moment. He watched her, captivated not just by her skill but by the way she seemed so at peace, so unburdened by the world. "Where did you learn to play?" he asked, breaking the silence. Clara glanced up, a shy smile playing on her lips. "My dad taught me when I was little. It's one of the few things he left behind." Michael nodded, sensing a story there but choosing not to press. Instead, he asked, "Do you ever feel stuck here?" She paused, her fingers halting on the strings. "Stuck? No. I feel rooted. There's a difference." Her words struck a chord in him. Rooted. It was something he had never felt. Despite all his wealth and success, his life had been one of constant movement, as though staying still might reveal something he didn't want to face. "You seem so sure of yourself," Michael said quietly. Clara laughed softly, setting the guitar aside. "I'm not always sure, but I've learned to appreciate what I have. Life is easier when you focus on what's real." The simplicity of her outlook both amazed and unsettled him. For someone who had spent his life chasing more money, more status, more distraction, it was a revelation. As the night drew to a close, Michael prepared to leave, but not before thanking Rosa and Clara once more. "I'll see you soon," he said, the words carrying more weight than he intended. Clara met his gaze. Her smile tinged with curiosity. "We'll see." On the drive back to his penthouse, Michael's mind raced. Clara was unlike anyone he had ever known, grounded, genuine, and completely unimpressed by his wealth. She was a mirror, reflecting back the emptiness he had been avoiding for years. Back at his penthouse, Michael sat by the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the city lights. The space around him, once a symbol of his success, now felt suffocating. He thought of Rosa's home, the laughter of her children, and Clara's quiet strength. He had spent his life avoiding vulnerability, but for the first time, he wondered if it might be the key to finding what he was missing. As the night wore on, Michael made a silent promise to himself. He would return to Rosa's house not just out of curiosity, but because something about being there felt right. It wasn't just a break from his world, it was a glimpse of a life he had never known he wanted. The following week, Michael found himself returning to Rosa's house again. The crisp winter air nipped at his face as he carried a bag filled with groceries and a loaf of freshly baked bread. It wasn't something he typically did, walking into a neighborhood store to shop for food, but somehow, it felt more fulfilling than any lavish purchase he'd ever made. As he approached the house, he noticed the faint sound of laughter filtering out from inside. When he knocked, one of Rosa's younger children opened the door, his face lighting up with excitement. "Mr. Michael, you're here," the boy exclaimed, pulling him inside. The scene before him was warm and chaotic in the best way. Rosa was at the stove, stirring a pot of something that smelled delicious, while Clara was seated at the table helping her youngest sibling with a school project. She looked up when Michael entered, her expression softening into a smile. "Back already?" she teased. Michael shrugged, setting the groceries down on the counter. "I thought I'd bring a little something to help out." Rosa glanced over her shoulder, her face full of gratitude. "You didn't have to do that, Mr. Michael. But thank you. Every little bit helps." As the evening wore on, Michael found himself blending seamlessly into their routine. He peeled potatoes beside Rosa, listening as she told stories about her childhood in a small town. And he helped the kids build an elaborate card tower that eventually toppled to their squeals of delight. It was the kind of simple joy he hadn't experienced in years, if ever. Later, after the children had gone to bed, Michael and Clara found themselves sitting at the small kitchen table, a pot of tea between them. The room was quiet now, save for the occasional creak of the house settling. "Why do you keep coming back?" Clara asked, her tone gentle but curious. Michael hesitated, his fingers tracing the edge of his mug. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe because it feels real here, different from everything else." Clara studied him, her eyes full of both understanding and caution. "You have everything most people dream of. Why does it feel like you're still searching for something?" The question hung in the air, heavy with truth. Michael didn't answer right away, unsure how to articulate the emptiness that had plagued him for so long. "I used to think I had it all figured out," he finally said, his voice low. "But the truth is, I've spent my life running from something I couldn't name. Being here, with you and your family, it feels like I've stopped running." Clara's expression softened, but she didn't press further. Instead, she reached across the table, her fingers brushing against his briefly before pulling away. The gesture was small, but it carried a weight that Michael felt deep in his chest. "You don't have to figure it all out at once," she said quietly. "Sometimes, it's enough just to be." The simplicity of her words struck him again. Clara had a way of grounding him, of making him feel like the complexities of his world didn't matter as much as he thought they did. As Michael prepared to leave, Clara walked him to the door. The air outside was colder now, a reminder that the season was shifting toward the heart of winter. "Thank you for tonight," Michael said, pausing on the doorstep. "For letting me be a part of this." Clara smiled, her hands tucked into the pockets of her sweater. "You're always welcome here." The sincerity in her voice warmed him more than the thick coat he was wearing. For a moment, he considered saying something more. Something about how much she and her family had come to mean to him. But the words felt too big. Too soon. So instead, he nodded and stepped out into the night. Back at his penthouse, Michael sat by the window once again. The lights of the city stretching out before him. It was a view he had always admired. A testament to his success. But now, it seemed almost insignificant compared to the modest warmth of Rosa's home. He thought about Clara. The way her laughter seemed to fill the room. The way she spoke with such conviction about things that truly mattered. She had a lightness about her. But it wasn't born from naivety, it was the kind of strength that came from weathering life's storms and choosing joy anyway. Michael couldn't ignore the way he felt when he was around her. It wasn't just attraction, it was something deeper. Something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. He thought about the walls he had built around himself. The life he had constructed to keep others out. And for the first time, he wondered if it was time to let someone in. But he also knew the challenges that would come with it. Clara's world was so different from his own. And he couldn't ignore the gap that existed between them. The judgments. The whispers. The questions, they were inevitable. And yet, he couldn't bring himself to walk away. That night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Michael made a decision. He didn't know where this path would lead. But he knew he wanted to see it through. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was moving toward something real. And for Michael Whitman, that was worth everything. The next morning, Michael woke with a renewed sense of purpose. He had spent most of the night thinking about Clara and her family, about the warmth they had so effortlessly shared with him, and about the person he wanted to become. He wasn't naive enough to think it would be easy. He knew that his privileged world was bound to collide with Clara's reality in ways that might test both of them. But the clarity of his feelings pushed him forward. By midday, Michael was back at Rosa's house. He had told himself it was just a casual visit. But the truth was, he was seeking something that his penthouse couldn't provide: connection. When Clara opened the door, her expression shifted from surprise to a soft, welcoming smile. Back again, she teased lightly, stepping aside to let him in. Michael chuckled. What can I say? Your family has better coffee than my espresso machine. She rolled her eyes playfully but didn't press further. And he followed her into the living room, where the children were sprawled out on the floor, coloring Christmas-themed drawings. Clara joined them, her presence so natural and unassuming that it was impossible not to admire her. Michael found a seat on the worn but comfortable couch and watched as Clara effortlessly balanced her time between helping her siblings and making conversation with him. It struck him how different she was from anyone he had ever known. There was no pretense. No hidden agenda, just authenticity. It was both humbling and magnetic. So, Michael, Clara said after a while, glancing at him with a curious tilt of her head. What does someone like you do on a regular day? I can't imagine you sitting on a couch coloring with kids. Michael smiled, leaning back. You'd be right. Most of my days are spent in meetings, managing projects, or dodging calls from people who think I have more time than I actually do. But lately, my days have been different. Different how? He hesitated, unsure how to phrase it. Let's just say I've started to appreciate the kind of moments I never used to notice. Like this. He gestured to the room, where laughter and cheerful chatter filled the air. I don't think I've ever felt more relaxed than I do right now. Clara's smile softened. But she didn't reply. Instead, she turned her attention back to her siblings, her expression thoughtful. Over the next few weeks, Michael became a fixture in their home. He helped with small repairs, joined them for simple meals, and even started assisting Clara with the children's homework. At first, Rosa watched his growing presence with cautious curiosity. But as the days went by, her initial skepticism began to waver. She couldn't deny the way Michael interacted with her family with genuine kindness and humility, qualities she hadn't expected from someone like him. One evening, After the children had gone to bed, Rosa cornered Michael in the kitchen. She was wiping down the counter, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Michael," she began, her voice gentle but firm, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," he replied, setting down the plate he had been drying. "What is it you're looking for here?" she asked, her gaze searching his face. "You're not like us. And I don't mean that as an insult. Your world is different. So why do you keep coming back?" Michael met her eyes, sensing the protective nature of her question. "Because here, I feel something I've never felt anywhere else. I feel at home." Rosa's hands stilled, her expression softening. But she wasn't entirely convinced. "And Clara? What about her? You know she's different, too. She's not like the women you're used to." "I know," Michael said without hesitation. "And that's why she's so important to me." Rosa studied him for a moment longer before nodding. "Just remember, Mr. Michael, this family has been through enough. We don't need more heartbreak." "I understand," Michael said sincerely. "I promise you, I'm not here to hurt anyone." That weekend, Michael and Clara took a walk through a nearby park. The air was crisp, and the leaves crunched under their feet as they wandered through the quiet paths. Clara had been quieter than usual, and Michael could sense that something was on her mind. "Are you okay?" he asked, breaking the silence. She nodded, but her expression remained thoughtful. "I've just been thinking about everything. About you." "Me?" He smiled lightly. "Should I be worried?" "No," she said quickly, shaking her head. "It's not that. It's just, you're so different from anyone I've ever known. Sometimes, I wonder if this us makes sense." Michael stopped walking, turning to face her. "Clara, it makes more sense than anything else in my life." Her gaze met his, conflicted but hopeful. "I want to believe that. But your world and mine, they're not the same." "They don't have to be," he said earnestly. "What matters is what's between us, not what's around us." Clara smiled faintly, but he could see the doubt lingering in her eyes. He knew it would take more than words to convince her that he was serious. But he was determined to show her that she mattered more than anything else. As they continued their walk, Michael reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. Clara didn't pull away, and the simple gesture filled him with a quiet joy he hadn't felt in years. For the first time, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be, unbeknownst to them. The challenges they feared were closer than they realized. The world they had kept at bay was about to intrude, testing the strength of their bond in ways they couldn't yet imagine. But in that moment, as they walked hand in hand under the fading light of the evening, Michael and Clara were just two people finding their way toward something real, something worth fighting for. The serenity Michael and Clara shared during their walks and evenings at Rosa's home began to fray as the outside world crept into their sanctuary. It started subtly, with Michael noticing whispers at his office and friends making curious comments about his recent behavior. Then came the rumors. A colleague asked him directly about the maid's daughter he had apparently been spending time with. Michael brushed it off, but he couldn't shake the discomfort that settled in his chest. The tipping point came when a tabloid picked up the story, under a bold headline that read, "Millionaire Michael Hayes trades high society for love in humble surroundings." The article detailed everything from his relationship with Clara to his frequent visits to Rosa's modest home. It painted their romance as either a noble gesture or an indulgent fantasy, depending on the tone of the reader's interpretation. The comments section was a battlefield of opinions, ranging from support to outright disdain. When Michael saw the article, his initial reaction was anger. He paced his penthouse, phone in hand, contemplating how to respond. The unfairness of it all stung deeply, how easily people could reduce something so meaningful to a shallow story for public consumption. But his concern quickly shifted to Clara. How would she feel about being thrust into the spotlight without warning? He didn't have to wait long to find out. That evening, Clara called him, her voice trembling with a mix of hurt and fear. "Michael, Have you seen it? She asked, though she already knew the answer. I have, he said gently, closing his eyes as he leaned against the wall. Clara. I'm so sorry. I didn't want this for you. It's not your fault, she replied. But he could hear the strain in her voice. I don't know how to handle this. People are saying horrible things about us. About my family. My mom, she's trying to act strong. But I can see it's bothering her. Michael clenched his jaw, his mind racing for a solution. I'll fix this. Clara. I'll make sure everyone knows the truth. And what is the truth? Michael? Her voice broke slightly. That I'm some girl who doesn't belong in your world. That I'm just a distraction for you. Don't say that, he said, his tone firm. You're not a distraction. You're everything. And I'll prove it to you. The following day, Michael recorded a video and posted it online. Sitting in his living room, dressed in simple clothes, he spoke directly to the camera. Good evening. I'm Michael Hayes. And I want to address the recent stories about my personal life. Yes. I've found someone special, someone who has shown me what love, family, and authenticity really mean. Her name is Clara. And she is nothing like the caricature painted in the media. She's strong, intelligent, and kind. And she's changed my life for the better. He paused, taking a deep breath. I've lived my entire life surrounded by luxury. But that life can be lonely, empty even. Clara and her family have reminded me of what truly matters: love, connection, and purpose. I will not let prejudice or gossip tarnish what we have. If you've ever loved someone deeply, you'll understand why I'm sharing this. Love is worth fighting for, and that's exactly what I intend to do. The video went viral within hours. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive, with many praising Michael for standing up for Clara and their relationship. Clara watched the video with Rosa by her side, tears streaming down her face. Do you think he really means it? Mom, she whispered. Rosa nodded, her voice steady. I do. Clara. A man doesn't risk his reputation like that unless his feelings are real. Despite the outpouring of support, the challenges didn't disappear overnight. Michael faced scrutiny from his business peers, some of whom questioned his judgment. Clara struggled with the idea of being constantly observed and judged by people who didn't know her. But through it all, Michael remained steadfast, showing her in small but meaningful ways that she was his priority. He sold his penthouse and moved into a cozy apartment closer to Clara's neighborhood. The new space was nothing like his previous home. It was warm, inviting, and filled with memories of their time together. Clara, inspired by his changes, decided to pursue her dream of becoming a teacher. Michael supported her every step of the way, helping her enroll in classes and even volunteering at local education programs with her. As New Year's Eve approached, Michael organized a small celebration at Rosa's house. It was an intimate gathering, with only close family and friends. Over dinner, Michael stood and raised a toast. This year, I learned what it means to truly live. Clara, Rosa, and this family have given me something I never thought I'd have: a sense of belonging. Thank you for welcoming me into your lives. After dinner, Michael pulled Clara aside. The stars twinkled above them as they stood on Rosa's small porch, the laughter of her siblings echoing from inside. Clara, he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. I've spent my entire life searching for something I couldn't name. Now I know it's you. You've shown me what love is. And I don't want to spend another moment without you. He knelt before her, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Clara, will you marry me? Clara's hands flew to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. For a moment, she couldn't speak, overwhelmed by the weight of his words. Finally, she nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Michael. Yes. Inside, Rosa watched through the window, her heart full. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that happiness was truly possible for her daughter. As the clock struck midnight, ushering in the new year, Michael and Clara stood in each other's arms, ready to face the future together, stronger, united, and deeply in love. As the stars shimmered above, Michael and Clara stood side by side, their hearts intertwined, ready to embrace a future built on love, resilience, and unwavering faith in one another. Their journey, from the cold, hollow halls of wealth to the warm, heartfelt simplicity of family and connection, had not been easy, but it was a testament to the power of love to break barriers, heal wounds, and create new beginnings. Rosa, watching her daughter and Michael from the corner of the room, smiled with quiet pride. Clara's happiness was the greatest gift she could have ever hoped for, and Michael, once lost in a world of superficiality, had found purpose, love, and a family he never knew he needed. This is not just the end of their story, but the beginning of a new chapter, one of hope, transformation, and the endless possibilities of love. Did you enjoy this heartwarming tale? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Life Stories for more inspiring journeys full of love, lessons, and the beauty of human connection. Stay tuned for the next story that will touch your heart and remind you of life's most precious treasures.